Before we jump into today's video, I just gotta give a quick shout out to my wife. This entire video was inspired by a conversation that we had last night. I will spill the beans on it at the end of this video, so stay tuned to the end of the video to hear about our conversation last night that sparked all of this. Before we talk about what's going on today in the digital age, let's take a long trip back down memory lane. In 1887, Thomas Edison released the phonograph. If you're unfamiliar, it looks like this. What it did was it would capture a vocal performance or any type of performance and write it onto this piece of clay script. If I can, I'll find a photo and put it here. When this came out in 1887, you had two sides of the fence coming out. You had one train of thought that said, wow, this is amazing. I get to listen to my favorite music performances at home with my family. Then you had another train of thought that said, this is blasphemy. Burn them at the stake. This is going to kill creativity for musicians. Musicians should only be performing live. Music should be enjoyed live. This will kill a musician. Why would anybody go watch a performing artist when they can listen to it at home? Now I know what you're thinking. This is ludicrous. This is kind of funny. You know, it's funny hearing this story now, considering we have a device in our pocket that gives us access to millions of songs. All I gotta do is click an app, Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your flavor is, search an artist or a song, or I can just hit DJ and it'll play some random music. At the time, it was extremely controversial. In the early 1900s, this technology was pushed in a different direction. Bell Telephone Labs came out with the invention of the early adoption of what we now know as the microphone. This technology was huge, especially during World War II. This is whenever we saw it get really fine-tuned for warfighting during the Great Wars. After World War II, there was a huge increase in this recording technology that allowed for bands that we love, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, to get into the world of recording music and push it into a whole new direction that we have not seen. Regardless of how you feel about the Beatles, all the Beatles, they have pushed recording music into a brand new light that we just take for granted today. This is the first time that artists are getting into the recording space and doing things from a non-traditional standpoint. If it weren't for the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, a lot of the things that we take for granted would never have happened. And at the time, while the Beatles were still loved, they were still highly controversial in what they would do in a studio. People resist change. You're going to notice this is a common theme. Pushing out of the 1940s and 50s, along came in the 1960s another huge advancement in recording technology that would change everything. And that's the mixing console. Prior, what bands would do is they would just have a couple of microphones out and record into some type of 8-tracking or some type of tracking device. Typically, we think of like an 8-track, but a lot of times, a lot of the earlier Stones records were just a single track. We just had one microphone, we recorded to a track, and that was it. Now with the invention and easy access to microphones, the console comes along and says, hey, we can plug all these microphones into this one soundboard, and now we can change the volumes of all things to get a pleasant recording that we can now put onto a vinyl or cassette. So the mixing table came out in the 1960s, and obviously it was the prominent thing in the 1970s for recording. All of that was about to change, though, because the world of personal computing was finally taking off. So much so, the first company to really put out software that's still relevant today was DigiDesigns. And you may know, you probably heard of Pro Tools, but in 1977, they released their first software called Sound Tools. Prior to the digital transformation that changed music forever, in the 1960s and 1970s, the typical workflow for recording artists was to come into a studio with a band, they would compose their music, and then they would record it. Now, as you can imagine, not everything was single take. So the way that sound engineers would go in and do editing and arrangement was they would literally have to cut tape and stitch it together. Very time-consuming and very high level of effort to get things right. I read an article where most of Eddie Van Halen's solos, he actually would try a bunch of different things, and then after his recording session, he would go backstage and basically take a bunch of different cuts of his solos, tape cuts, splice them together, and then learn what he was doing to learn the part. So this was very time-consuming, very just hard to do well. Fast forward to the 1980s, digital's taking off. It went from being this nerd thing to now it's being mainstream. You know, everything from electronic drums to synthesizers to just think about the 80s. When you think about the 80s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Personal computers were starting to become a household staple in the late 80s. It really wasn't until the 90s, at least where I lived, where everybody had computers. In the 80s is whenever studios are starting to see the benefit of going digital. You know, the writing was on the wall, even though it was about to face an extreme amount of criticism and just a lot of people are trying to avoid change. Let's just face it. So in 1991, a new kid came on the block. DigiDesigns released a new software called Pro Tools. Pro Tools was one of the first in the digital space that allowed tracking up to 4 tracks. So prior to this, you really only had 1 track if you think about it, because yeah, you have multiple different faders on a mixing board, but you're writing to a piece of tape and you just hope you got your mix right before you hit the record button. What Pro Tools allowed producers to do is now we can separate and we can mix, but we can also do a lot of post editing. So no longer do I have to go in and cut tape. All I have to do is Command X or Control. You know, if you're a editor now or a music producer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. At the time, this was highly controversial. I mean, so much so Dave Grohl recently released a documentary talking about Pro Tools and the fall of the modern studio. As we continue to move further into the digital age, you know, it sounds so silly to debate the relevance of tools like Pro Tools, Logic Pro, or any other digital audio workstation of your choice. It's hard for me to imagine doing my job without these tools. However, the extreme amount of scrutiny that these tools went through, and still from purists fight these things, which good on you, bro. It's not, you know. They do a lot. They do a lot for our community. I mean, without these tools, I may not have had access to my current passion and what I'm making my life's work. They basically empower the individual and take power away from corporations, but they also enable corporations. There's still a lot of good corporations doing well. There's still some good deals to be had if you want to get published. However, the rise of the indie artist is now. The digital age, the digital transformation is now. We are living in a golden era of music, and I feel like it's not talked about enough. It's so easy to point the finger at a big label bad, indie artist good. Think about that. This is the first time that it's so easily accessible to be an independent artist. I mean, if you're watching this, your point of this, I'm an independent artist. I'm not a Fender affiliate. I'm doing all this out of, I'm bootstrapped, you know, and you're here, you're supporting the channel. A lot of you guys are jumping over to Patreon and supporting me, and you know, it is just such a cool thing in the day that we're living in. But to get into the spicy topic of today, I want to talk about artificial intelligence and what it means in the digital age. So the story that caused this whole video to come about happened last night with a conversation with my wife. I had just finished a recording session, and I was talking with her while I was brushing my teeth about how I came about writing this next song. So I'll show you an example here in a second of how all this works so you can see the power and maybe consider picking it up for yourself. I'm studying neo-soul. It's an area that's pushing my guitar talent. I came up with a chord progression that is literally the peak of my guitar playing and compositional skills at this time. I'm using a lot of non-diatonic chords and a lot of extended voicing on the guitar. And it's just very soul-felt music for me. So I write this song, or I record this original riff. I bounced out just the dry track, because if you remember on the Tonemaster Pro, I preach recording 2 tracks. I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. So I recorded my JC1, the same tone that I showed in the last video. I recorded with that amp, and I also just recorded the dry guitar signal. I bounced out the dry guitar signal, and I pumped it into this program called Easy Keys 2. It has a tab called Bandmate, where it uses algorithms. We're going to call it AI, even though it's not a true AI. It's an algorithm. It used that algorithm to analyze my chord playing, said, hey, I think you're playing this chord with a 90% accuracy. And it turned out it was spot on. I was like, yeah, that's actually exactly what I played. And it even added some little coloring to one of the chord voicings I was using. After it got the chord progression, it gave me recommended MIDI patterns to play on it. So the song that I'm writing right now, and that I'll show you in a second, I didn't write the piano part. I used my original creativity on guitar and leveraged machine learning to come up with a part that I didn't originally compose. You know, I get that in a mix, I do the drums. Same thing with the drums. I use Easy Drummer 3 and Bandmate. It's all machine learning, which is just so cool. I mean, I have a degree in computer science. I worked as a machine learning engineer at Amazon. I'm a nerd. I love this stuff, and I love AI, and I think about it a lot. And I think that combination of man and machine is going to continue, that relationship, companionship is going to continue to grow. I mean, think about it. You feel naked without your phone in your pocket. And if you don't, how do you not feel naked without it? Because I would love that. You know, I'm someone who's using an Apple Watch to record this, Apple phone to do all that. Like, I am just one with technology. It is an integral part of my life. So to come back to the story, I was like, I got this chord progression, but I just don't know where to take it. I'm not used to writing non-diatonically. This is an area that I'm trying to push myself to grow in. So I was like, wait a second. This AI tool that I used, it can actually recommend chord changes. So I pulled it up and I copied over the verse, and I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like. But it gave me a randomized chord progression that I could use. And I liked the way it sounded. At first I was kind of iffy because it's so far, but I just sent it to my friends like, hey, what do you think about this progression? And then a lot of them were like, man, this is just really chill. Perfect. That's exactly what I'm going for. I'm writing an album called The Lonely Island right now, and it's a thought experiment about being stuck on an island. You have unlimited food and recording gear, but you have no music to listen to. So what are you writing? So the name of this song is called In the Hammock. This whole thought experiment is kind of a metaphor for my mental space right now. I'm in the pursuit of music, and sometimes it feels like I'm going insane, like I'm on a lonely island where I see this dream clear as day, but I'm still on this island, and I need to come up with my own music that, this song is for my anxiety was up high, and I was very easy to anger because I'm just stressed. It's a big change, but I am excited about this. So I wrote this song to kind of be like my mental in the hammock chilling. So when you hear this, that's the inspiration for the track. For me, this has enabled me to study in a new space that pushed me. It came up with chord voicings that I didn't know on the guitar, and I would have never thought to place them together. So like for the first chord is an E6/8, and I do a really cool voicing on it that I've never played in my life. I had to learn my part. So this tool is enhancing my songwriting and guitar skills. And I was so stoked about this. And then I go to show my wife, and she goes, well, are you going to give it songwriting credit? I'm like, of course not. Why would I? It's AI. I use this for my tool. And it was so interesting to hear her view of well, it wrote that part and then you copied it. So it's funny because I think about these things as a previous AI engineer, and with all my friends being in technology and software engineering, we don't view it this way. We've used ChatGPT from basically individualized learning. Oh, I'm working on this algorithm. I can't figure this out. What do you recommend? Or, hey, I'm in a new, I've been in this framework in the telephone industry called Jexel. It's basically a Java version of JavaScript, if that makes sense. It's Basically, I've been programming state machines. While that's not the sexiest topic in the world to discuss, there's not a lot of good resources out there on Jexel. So I was using ChatGPT to teach myself Jexel and how to be effective in the workplace. And my friends are doing this too with his language. He's learning a C# language and that whole .NET framework. So we're used to using this tool day in and day out for professional use. And it was so interesting to hear my wife's perspective. Well, one, I was kind of offended. I was like, what? This is my work. What you talking about? If it weren't for me, none of this would happen. But at the same side, it is interesting to hear the split in people's opinions about AI and creativity. And it just reminded me of how people felt about recorded music in the 1800s, or how people felt about analog gear going digital. And, obviously my entire YouTube channel is built around, so far, most of you guys are following me because of the Tone Master Pro and the videos I'm putting out about digital guitar amps. And it's so interesting the age that we live in. Because just how in the last video I put out where it said tube amps are dead, there are some dedicated tube amp guys who have attacked me on all platforms. And that's fine. It doesn't bother me because I own the technology. I own both, and I see the value proposition in going digital. And I think the same argument is true about AI. So it is going to be so interesting watching what you guys think about this entire concept in the comment section. With that, let me show you what this actually looks like. Comment and let me know what you think about this. So maybe a fun experiment would be for you to pause right now and say, hey, pre-watching what you're about to show me in Logic, I think this. Now let me show you what my tool looks like, and then update your comment and be like, after watching this, I think this. All right, let's get it. All right, here's the song that I am discussing. Okay, that's not much, right? But this is my songwriting process. First, I come up with chords, then I will do bass typically, then I'll write a bunch of pads, a bunch of leads, so on and so forth, and I try to play piano because I suck at piano. I'm a great guitar player, but not so much keyboard. So this has been a godsend. All right, so what I did was I recorded both tracks, and I'll just show you. This is from the Tone Master Pro. So this is my raw guitar signal. This is the tone I created on YouTube yesterday. So what I did was I bounced out this file. I came to my keys. Let me pull up Easy Keys. So here's what I did. I go to Bandmate, and I gave it my raw guitar signal. So here, we'll listen to it. So the first time I did this, it analyzed it and said, oh, this is what I think you're doing, and it gave me rhythm matches for it. So all these chords are right. These are the chords that I'm playing. The E, Aug, D is a little off, but it works, and that's just kind of how theory works. Sometimes you can analyze things from like 3 or 4 different viewpoints. So it works, right? So then it gave me a recommended path, and that's this chord progression you see here, and this is the MIDI pattern. Insane. So I was struggling to write the next part, and I didn't really know what to go with it, so I copied over this part over here, and then I said suggest chords. Then what I did is I went to each one, and you can do this from like a genre if you want, but what I did is I just hit this change chord randomly until it came up with something really cool. So here's the chord progression it came up with afterwards. Let's see if I can get it just to play this. All right, don't steal my work. I wrote this first. I've got it time-stamped. No, but I'll show you all this because I'm not a gatekeeper, and this is a really great tool for songwriting, and it's increasing my creativity because now I know, oh wow, this is interesting harmonies that I normally wouldn't go for, but my ear really enjoys what they sound like. And so I went in, I hit replace MIDI, and you can see my last workflow from last night of everything I did. Then I came in and I recorded this guitar part for it. Let me solo this out. Here's the guitar part I wrote based on that. Cool, right? Imagine if the guys in the 70s had access to this, because I don't know if you're like me, but I've always, my whole life, I've just an old soul. I think the 70s is like the golden era of music, but I think we're getting back to that because at least for me, what I am trying to accomplish is the blend of human and machine. I just think about this all the time about AI and the philosophical implications of it, and I just think we're living in such an interesting time in human history. Before I continue, I just want you to pause and just write a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on AI and music. And what do you think about tools like this? Do you think that this is complete bogus and takes away from creativity? Or do you see the power that a tool like this provides songwriters? Now, man, you can take a $5,000 investment and really have a powerful studio at the tip of your fingers. And while $5,000 may sound like a lot to some, the alternative prior to now is you would need about $200,000 in the 70s, where that money is way more expensive than it is today because you'd have to pay all the people to play this stuff. There's just so much that goes into it outside of just equipment. I believe that AI and tools like this are going to be an integral part of our lives moving forward. And I just encourage you to not be the crowd from the 1800s that fought recorded music. Because of the innovators who continue to push past the naysayers, we are where we are today. So I just want to encourage you, while I enjoy the debate and the discussion and seeing what people believe, I just want you to remember those who came before us, who helped us get to where we are today. And don't lean on AI as a crutch. Don't be someone who believes AI is going to replace you, because here's the thing. If I would have never have sat down and had this idea for this album and this song, this would have never have come into creation. This would never be a thing. This will never replace artists and creatives. It is only going to make us better. And for those reasons, I'm excited. To end out on some closing thoughts here. One, if you've enjoyed this script up to this point has all been created with ChatGPT. So, fooled you. Gotcha. I will put a link down to some research if you want to read a little bit deeper into the history of recording music. There's a really good link that I first came across when I studied the history of recorded music as a Full Sail student. Lastly, if you're interested in studying this stuff, and if you do want to continue to support my art and my channel, please consider joining my Patreon. It's $5 a month. I put my heart and soul into these lessons, and I really believe that it is worth your hard-earned money. I try to keep it at $5 so it's easily accessible, and I'm trying to play the numbers game. While Hell, $5 a month is a cup of coffee for me a month. I would just love to have you over there. It would really mean a lot to me. And I am trying to give you all of the value I can. I'm trying to give you at least $50 a month worth of content. So if you're interested in that, please check it out. The links will be in the description of this video, or you can just go to patreon.com/DamianAndy. As always, I am a believer in an attitude of gratitude. So I want to express my gratitude for you guys just watching this right now. I have enjoyed every comment, even the ugly ones, and have just enjoyed engaging with you guys and learning more about you and your story and your interests and talking about this stuff. Like, it's so cool coming to YouTube, being on other platforms, because on YouTube, you get the opportunity to really dive deep and to really build a community of passionate human beings. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting my channel and my art. Thank you for just showing up and, continuing to push this thing forward. As such, I would like for you to leave me, as an addition to all your other comments, please let me know 1 or 2 things that you're grateful for. Leave me your thoughts. I love reading them, no matter if you're a hater of AI and the digital revolution or if you're a full-on adopter like I am. At the end of the day, we are all just human beings trying to create art and make sense of this world around us. Thank you guys, and I'm really looking forward to reading y'all's comments.